Everyone bullied her for being ugly, until the billionaire CEO said, "She's my girl." They laughed at her every day, called her ugly, mocked her clothes, her silence, her presence. No one defended her. Until one day, the billionaire CEO walked into the meeting room, looked them all in the eye, and said, "She's my girl," and everything changed. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. The laugh hit her harder than she expected, sharp, echoing, and full of something cruel. Molly Harper flinched, even though she pretended not to hear. Her fingers tightened around the stack of client files she'd just printed, the corners poking into her palms. She didn't look up. She never did. The beige carpet beneath her worn flats had become her safest horizon. "She actually wore that again," whispered someone behind her, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll guess the circus is in town," another voice chimed in, followed by a round of laughter. Molly kept walking, faster now, cheeks burning. The old fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, buzzing in rhythm with her racing thoughts. Her reflection in the glass wall of the conference room caught her off guard. Wrinkled beige shirt, button still missing near the collar, the usual slouchy black pants that hung awkwardly on her frame, glasses slipping down her nose. She pulled her name tag ribbon back over her shoulder. It had started tearing days ago. She kept meaning to fix it, but what was the point? Inside the room, the department heads were already gathering. She opened the door quietly, hoping to slip in unnoticed. She never did. "Late again, Harper," snorted Tasha, the lead of the marketing team. Impeccably dressed, makeup flawless, heels sharper than her tone. Molly glanced at the clock. She wasn't late, she never was, but saying something would just give them more to chew on. So she bowed her head and mumbled, "Sorry." Tasha rolled her eyes and turned back to her team, whispering something that made the interns giggle. Molly took her seat in the corner, away from the glossy smiles and loud confidence of everyone else. No one ever sat next to her. She wasn't sure when it started, the jokes, the looks, the sighs when she spoke. But now it was just part of the routine. She blended into the wallpaper. And honestly, some days that felt safer. But today, something was different. The room quieted, not gradually, but all at once, like someone had cut the volume with a knife. Molly looked up, startled. He had entered. Alexander Blake, the CEO, the man who turned a failing software company into one of the most successful tech firms in New York, and did it without ever raising his voice. Rumors swirled about him constantly. A genius, a recluse, a control freak, maybe even a heartbreaker. But no one really knew him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an unreadable face and ice-blue eyes that could silence a room without a word. Today, as always, he wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, shirt open just enough to break the rules. He didn't walk. He owned the floor with each step. He was the kind of man who didn't need to explain himself. People just moved out of the way. And yet, those eyes, they didn't scan the top executives. They didn't look at Tasha's perfect smile or the CFO's expensive watch. They stopped on Molly. For a second that felt like forever, their eyes locked. Molly froze. Did she have ink on her face? Her shirt inside out? "What?" He blinked, then walked toward the front of the room. She forced herself to look down again. "As some of you may know," he began, his voice calm but commanding, "we've secured the contract with OmniServe." "Big win. But I didn't call this meeting to celebrate. I want to talk about something else." People leaned forward. Phones were discreetly put away. Even Tasha's smirk faded. "There's a culture forming in this office," Alexander continued, "and I don't like it." Silence, a shift in the air. "I've walked these halls. I've heard things, laughter at the expense of others, judgments made on appearance instead of work ethic, whispered cruelty passed off as humor." His tone darkened slightly. That ends now. Molly felt her chest tighten. Was he talking about her? Alexander stepped closer to the long table, slowly rolling up his sleeves. Some of you have forgotten what we stand for: talent, dedication, respect. He paused, letting the words sink in. And if you think bullying has a place here, think again. He turned, eyes sweeping across the room. Then something happened. He walked straight toward her. Molly's breath caught. She sank a little in her seat, unsure if she should stand or... He stopped beside her chair. Tasha's voice broke the tension with a forced chuckle. Oh, come on. No one here's actually bullying anyone, right? Alexander didn't even look at her. He placed a hand gently on the back of Molly's chair. This woman, he said loud and clear, is one of the hardest working people in this building. She stays late, fixes your mistakes, keeps things running when no one notices. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. And from now on, he said, his voice dropping just enough to make it more intimate, she'll be noticed. Molly blinked, trying to process what was happening. Her ears were ringing. Alexander looked down at her, not with pity, but something deeper, protective, steady. She's not your joke, he said, voice sharp. She's my girl. Gasps. The whole room fell into stunned silence. Tasha's jaw literally dropped. Someone coughed. Even the usually unshakable head of finance shifted in his chair. Molly couldn't move. Meeting adjourned, Alexander said, straightening his cuffs. You may all go. But no one stood up, except him and Molly. He extended a hand to her, and somehow, trembling, she took it. But before she could say a single word, before her mind could catch up with the moment, he leaned closer and whispered, just for her, let them wonder. And with that, he walked out of the room, leaving behind a storm of stunned stares, and a girl who suddenly wasn't invisible anymore. Molly's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stood in the hallway just outside the conference room, her back pressed to the cold wall. The sound of the door swinging shut behind her hadn't even faded, and already the entire floor was buzzing, not with the usual gossip, but with disbelief, questions, jealousy. She's his girl? No way. He has to be joking. That was just a figure of speech, right? Maybe she blackmailed him. Molly clutched the folders tighter to her chest. Her heart pounded so loud she barely heard the words, but she felt them. Every stare, every confused, judging look. Like suddenly she'd grown two heads. The air had changed. She had become visible, but not in the way she'd dreamed of. She didn't go back to her desk. She didn't think she could. Instead, she slipped into the quiet safety of the ladies' restroom. She locked herself in the farthest stall and sat down on the closed lid, trying to breathe. What just happened? Alexander Blake, the untouchable CEO, had stood up for her, called her his girl, in front of everyone. It couldn't be real, couldn't. Maybe she was dreaming. Maybe she hit her head on the copier and none of this actually. The bathroom door opened, muffled voices. She held her breath. Did you see the look on her face? Like a terrified rabbit. That outfit, that's what the CEO wants, please. She's like a charity case. I bet it's a bet or something. You know, like one of those challenges. Make the ugliest girl in the office feel special. Laughter. Then the sound of heels clicking away. Molly stayed frozen. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't even try to stop it. Not because she believed them, not fully, but because a part of her, that tired, fragile part, wondered if they were right. Why would someone like him stand up for someone like her? She wiped her face, stood, and splashed cold water onto her cheeks. When she looked into the mirror, she saw the same thing she always saw. Messy bun, tired eyes, glasses slipping forward. A girl who worked hard and tried not to be noticed. And now she'd been thrown into the center of everything by the last person she expected. Meanwhile, on the top floor of the building, where glass walls met skyline views and silence reigned like a throne, Alexander Blake stood behind his desk, staring out over the city. His phone buzzed. He didn't move. Another buzz, then a knock at the door. "Come in," he said calmly. His assistant Claire entered with her tablet clutched to her chest. You're trending." Alexander turned. "Trending?" Claire looked nervous. "Not on social media, yet. But inside this company, you just caused a full-blown earthquake." "Every floor is talking about Molly Harper." He didn't react. "Was that planned?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Because, no offense, sir, but you don't usually get involved in social things." Alexander sat down, interlaced his fingers, and looked at her. "I saw something I didn't like," he said simply. Claire tilted her head. "Is it true, though? Is she really—" "She's talented," he interrupted, "and overlooked. I'm changing that." Claire hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Okay, just be prepared. People are going to twist this. They already are." "I know." He looked down at the printed schedule on his desk. The weekly review was in 20 minutes. Department heads again, including Molly. He paused, fingers tapping softly on the polished wood. "Tell her to come up early," he said. Claire blinked. "You want to speak with her, alone?" He nodded. "Okay, I'll tell her." Molly didn't want to go. Her hands trembled as she rebuttoned her wrinkled shirt, trying to make herself look less broken. She'd fixed her glasses with a small piece of tape. It looked awful. But she had no choice. She climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator. Too many people. Too many eyes. By the time she reached the top floor, she was out of breath. Claire met her at the glass door. "He's waiting for you," she said, voice softer than usual. Molly stepped in. Her heels made small, nervous taps against the shiny floor. Alexander was standing near the window again, back to her, arms crossed. "Sir?" she said, voice barely audible. He turned. His eyes, sharp and unreadable, softened a little when they met hers. "Close the door, Molly." She did. There was a moment of silence. Then he spoke, with the same calm, commanding voice that had echoed through the meeting room earlier. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" She blinked. "Tell what?" "That they were treating you like that." Molly swallowed. It didn't matter. He walked toward her. Slow, deliberate steps. "Of course it matters," she looked down. "I didn't want to be a problem." "You're not the problem," he said firmly. "They are." Molly didn't know how to respond. The way he looked at her, like he saw her, not the frumpy clothes or the awkward posture, made her feel strangely exposed. "I didn't mean to embarrass you," he added. "In the meeting," she shook her head. "You didn't. I don't understand why you did it." He was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, he said, "Because I've been watching." Her eyes widened. "Not in a weird way," he added quickly, noticing her reaction. "I watch everyone. That's my job. And I saw how they treated you, how you kept your head down. Did the work no one else wanted, never complained. People like that deserve better." Molly felt her throat tighten. He took another step closer. His voice lowered, almost a whisper now. "Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who say nothing. But that doesn't mean they should stay invisible." A silence stretched between them. Molly's heart thudded against her ribs. No one had ever said anything like that to her before, not with that tone, that care. But just as she started to process the warmth rising in her chest, the office intercom crackled. "Meeting in 5 minutes." Alexander glanced toward the clock, then back at her. "Come sit next to me today," he said. Not a question. A quiet instruction. She nodded, then turned to leave, breath caught in her throat. But before she reached the door, he called out softly, "Oh, and Molly?" She looked back. He smiled, just a flicker. "You don't need to change a thing." And for the first time in a long while, she smiled too. But down below, in the echoing silence of the now empty conference room, someone wasn't smiling. Tasha stood at the far wall, arms crossed, jaw clenched, and in her hand, a printed photo of Alexander and Molly, snapped through the glass during the meeting. She stared at it for a long time, then whispered to herself, "Let's see how long this little fairy tale lasts." The conference room felt like a theater before the curtain rose. Chairs scraped, voices hushed. The heads of departments fidgeted with their tablets and coffee cups, waiting for the CEO's arrival. Every single one of them was buzzing with the same question: would she come back? Molly Harper, the quiet one, the joke, the shadow that blended into beige walls, now the center of attention. And when the glass doors finally opened, every head turned. There she was, same glasses, same shy posture, same clothes, but this time she wasn't alone. Alexander Blake walked beside her, not ahead, not behind, beside her. Molly didn't meet anyone's eyes. She focused on her feet, on the rhythm of each step, as if any misstep would wake her from the strange dream she was still trapped inside. They reached the table. Alexander pulled out a chair for her. The room stiffened. "Good morning," he said casually, adjusting the cuffs of his white shirt. He didn't wear a tie, never did. "Let's begin." No one spoke, not even Tasha. For the next hour, Alexander ran the meeting with his usual calm control, discussing sales numbers, software timelines, launch issues. His voice was steady, his gaze sharp. But occasionally, just for a second, his eyes drifted toward Molly. Not in a way anyone else would notice, but she did. And every time he looked her way, she felt something stir, like she mattered, like she wasn't invisible anymore. But as the meeting drew to a close and people began rising from their seats, the tension returned. Tasha stood, arms crossed, a perfectly timed smirk on her lips. "So," she said, her voice loud enough for the whole room, "is this our new seating arrangement? Should we start assigning partners?" Some people chuckled. Nervously, Molly's heart sank. She started to stand, to walk away, to disappear again, but Alexander didn't move. He looked directly at Tasha, unblinking. "I don't assign seating," he said, "but I do notice who wastes their energy dragging others down instead of lifting their own team up." Tasha's smile faltered. "I'd focus on that," he added, "before your numbers slip again next quarter." The room went dead quiet. Someone coughed. Tasha's eyes narrowed, but she didn't reply. Molly, still frozen beside her chair, couldn't breathe. When the room finally cleared, she lingered, unsure if she should stay or go. Alexander turned to her. "Do you have lunch plans?" he asked. She blinked. "Lunch?" He gave the faintest smile. "It's a thing where people eat food and talk. You've heard of it?" She laughed, small, startled. "I mean, I usually eat alone, at my desk." "Not today." He walked toward the door. She followed, hesitant but curious. The cafe across the street was small, warm, quiet. Alexander chose a booth in the corner, far from the windows. When they sat down, he loosened the sleeves of his shirt and glanced around like a man, trying to remember what it felt like to just exist. Molly didn't know what to say. "Oh." He ordered black coffee. She asked for tea. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was just full, like something unspoken lived in the space between their words. "You surprise me," he said finally. Molly looked up, startled. "Why?" "You don't talk much, but when you do, you listen first. Most people speak just to fill air." She looked down at her tea. "I learned a long time ago that people don't like what I say, so I just stopped trying." "Maybe they never deserve to hear it," he said quietly. That silence returned. Then he asked, "Do you like working here?" She hesitated. "Yes, I love the work, the structure. I like solving problems. Making systems better. I like being useful. But," she swallowed, "people don't always see me, or they see something else." Alexander nodded, as if he understood more. Then he led on. "I don't care how you dress," he said, "or how quiet you are. I care about what you do, and you've done more than anyone gives you credit for. She stared at him. "Why are you being so kind to me?" There was no sarcasm in her voice, no flirtation, just honest confusion. Alexander looked at her for a long time, then said something she didn't expect. "Because I see you." 3 simple words, and yet they hit deeper than anything she'd heard in years, because for once, someone did. But just as her heart started to absorb the warmth of that moment. Back at the office, on a sleek laptop screen in a corner cubicle, a file uploaded. A photo. The one Tasha had printed. Now scanned, cropped, enhanced. She hit send, attaching it to an anonymous email. Subject line, "Sleeping with the boss or just lucky?" And as Molly smiled, really smiled, for the first time in a long time, a storm was already brewing. The email hit inboxes like a lightning bolt. No greeting, no signature, just a subject line sharp enough to draw blood. "Sleeping with the boss or just lucky?" Attached, a high-resolution photo of Molly and Alexander standing side by side, his hand on the back of her chair, her startled expression, his protective stance. A moment frozen in time, twisted by the wrong caption. At first, it was just whispers. By noon, it was wildfire. Laughter in the break room. Fake coughing that disguised the words, "teacher's pet." Sideways glances from people who'd never even said her name before. The girl no one noticed had now become the headline, and Molly had no idea. She sat at her desk, headphones in, focused on an overdue report. Her tea had gone cold beside her. She hadn't checked her phone. She hadn't heard the giggles behind the glass walls. Not yet, but Alexander had. He stood at the far end of the building. In his private office, his phone in hand, jaw clenched. Claire stood across from him, face pale. "I traced the upload," she said, nervously twisting the tablet in her fingers. "It came from Tasha's computer, but the email was sent anonymously." Alexander's voice dropped like a hammer. "She wants a war." Claire hesitated. "What do you want to do?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the window, fingers pressed to the glass. The city buzzed below, unaware that a woman's dignity was being torn apart, floor by floor. "Don't tell Molly yet," he said finally. "Not until I figure out how to fix this. But she'll see it eventually." "I know," his voice was low. "But not before I'm ready." Downstairs, Tasha sipped her coffee like a queen at court. Her eyes flicked across her phone screen, watching the reactions pour in. She wasn't stupid. She knew Alexander would suspect her, but she didn't care, because now the whole office was watching. And Molly? Sweet little mouse girl Molly? She'd feel it. She'd break under it. Tasha leaned back in her chair. "Let's see how long his girl lasts," she murmured. At 2:17 p.m., Molly finally took her break. She wandered into the break room, still a little dazed from lunch. There had been something about Alexander's eyes, something steady and quietly kind. It had followed her back to her desk, wrapping around her like warmth in winter. But now, as she poured hot water into her tea mug, she noticed something strange. Silence. Too much of it. The 2 interns stopped talking when she entered. One of the designers gave a small cough and suddenly remembered she had a meeting. A group near the microwave avoided her eyes. Molly looked down, then saw the phone in one of their hands, her face on the screen. Her heart dropped. She walked over slowly, as if wading through ice. The screen didn't lie. There it was. The photo, the headline, her name, her humiliation, the breath caught in her throat. The mug slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. Nobody moved to help her. She turned and walked out, fast, ignoring the boiling in her chest, the sting in her eyes. Not again, not after everything. She pushed open the stairwell door and sat on the first step, trying to catch her breath. It was worse than the teasing, worse than the name tags and cruel jokes, because this was designed to destroy her. And the worst part, it almost worked. She pulled off her glasses and buried her face in her hands. Tears came, quiet and angry. She had started to believe, started to hope. She had let someone in. And now she was bleeding for it. It didn't take long for Alexander to find her. He moved faster than he wanted to admit, skipping the elevator, taking the same stairs she did. When he opened the door to the second-floor landing and saw her hunched over, glasses in her lap, a rage built inside him he hadn't felt in years. "Molly," she looked up, startled, her eyes red, her face pale. "I saw it," she whispered. "They're calling me names." Again. His jaw tightened. "I know." Her voice cracked. "Why are they so cruel?" He sat beside her on the step, their shoulders barely touching. "Because they're afraid," he said. "Afraid of anything real? You're real? That scares them?" She shook her head. "They think I slept with you. They think that's the only way I could ever matter." Alexander turned to her. "Do you care what they think?" She hesitated. "I care what you think," she said softly, "and now I feel like I've embarrassed you." That broke something in him. He reached out, slowly, gently, and lifted her chin so their eyes met. "Molly Harper," he said, voice low, "you haven't embarrassed me for a second." Her eyes searched his face, for pity, for performance, for some trick. But it wasn't there, just sincerity. And something else, something warmer, deeper. "Molly," he said again, "I need you to trust me." "With what?" "I'm going to fix this. I promise you. But I need time, and I need you not to give up." She looked down. "That's all I ever do. Just survive." His fingers brushed hers, just barely, and she didn't pull away. "You're not surviving anymore," he said. "You're fighting back, just by being here, by walking in every day, by not letting them change who you are." And then, slowly, he added something he hadn't planned to say. "You're stronger than you think, and I'm not the only one who sees it." She looked up again, tears still in her eyes, but also something new. Steel. But before either of them could say another word, Claire burst through the stairwell door, breathless. "Alexander, you need to see this, now." He stood, his expression instantly shifting. "What happened?" Claire's voice was sharp. "HR just received an official anonymous complaint. Against you," Molly gasped. "For what?" Claire looked at her. "For favoritism, for inappropriate relations with a subordinate. They want an investigation." Alexander didn't blink. Of course, this wasn't just gossip anymore. It was war, and someone wanted Molly gone. The HR conference room was nothing like the main boardroom. No skyline view, no sleek table, just beige walls, a humming AC vent, and a stale air of discomfort, like the kind that settles before something unfair is about to happen. Molly sat at the far end of the small table, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes flicked nervously between the two HR reps seated across from her. One of them, Ms. Keller, was speaking in a voice that tried, and failed, to sound neutral. "This is just a standard inquiry, Ms. Harper. Nothing has been concluded yet. We're simply following up on a concern raised by an anonymous staff member." Concern. What a polite way to accuse someone of sleeping their way into a promotion she never even got. Molly tried to steady her voice. "But I didn't do anything." Ms. Keller gave a small nod, as if acknowledging a polite lie. "We're not here to assume. We're here to gather information. We've already spoken to Mr. Blake." That made Molly's chest tighten. "What did he say?" The second rep, a younger man named Jonah, replied. "He confirmed that he supported you publicly during a meeting but denied any personal relationship. However, the photo that was shared throughout the company, well, some interpreted it differently." Molly blinked fast. Interpreted. They didn't say she was guilty, but they already treated her like she was. "May I ask something?" she said suddenly, her voice shaking. "If I wore makeup, if I dressed like everyone else, would anyone care about that photo?" Neither HR rep responded, because they both knew the answer. She stood quietly. "I didn't ask him to stand up for me. I never even spoke to him before that meeting. But he was the only person who saw what was happening, and he chose not to look away. Jonah shifted in his chair. Ms. Keller cleared her throat. "That's all for now, Ms. Harper," she said. "We'll notify you if further steps are needed." Molly nodded once, turned, and walked out with her head held a little higher, even though every step felt like her knees could buckle. On the top floor, Alexander stood with both hands pressed against the edge of his desk, staring down at the printed HR complaint. Claire stood beside him, silent. "She's being used," he muttered. "They know she won't fight back?" Claire nodded. "And they're hoping you will, so they can turn it into a power abuse scandal. They won't win. They already made her bleed." "Sir?" Alexander's jaw tensed. "Then I'll show them who they're bleeding." He grabbed his blazer from the chair. "Where are you going?" Claire asked. "To break some rules." Molly tried to disappear for the rest of the afternoon. She took her laptop into the tiny storage room off the finance wing and sat between two filing cabinets. It was dusty, cold, and smelled faintly of old ink and whiteout, but it was quiet, safe, or so she thought. The door creaked open without warning. Tasha stepped inside, her heels clicking against the linoleum. Molly looked up, startled. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice low. Tasha didn't answer. She just leaned against the cabinet, arms crossed. "You really thought he meant it, didn't you?" she said finally, her voice soft and venomous. "That whole 'she's my girl' moment?" Molly stood up, fists clenched. "I never asked him for anything." Tasha smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, I know. That's what makes it worse. He gave you everything without you even asking. Some of us worked 10 years for this, stayed late, fought for scraps, and still got passed over. And then you show up with your thrift store clothes and your sad little silence, and he picks you?" Molly stepped back. "So, you sent that email?" Tasha shrugged. "I just exposed what was already there." "No," Molly said. "You twisted it, because you couldn't stand that he saw something in someone who didn't wear heels or lipstick." Tasha's eyes flashed. "You don't belong here, Molly. You were never meant for this world." Molly stared at her. Her chest was tight, her legs trembling, but she didn't look away. "You're right," she whispered. "I wasn't meant for your world." Then she walked past her, out of the room, heart pounding harder than it had in days. But just as she turned the corner, she ran straight into Alexander. He caught her by the arms before she could fall. "Easy." Her eyes filled with tears, not because she was scared, but because for the first time she wasn't. "They're trying to break me," she whispered. "They won't." She looked up at him. "Why do you care so much?" His answer came quickly, quietly. "Because no one stood up for me once, and it nearly destroyed me." Her breath hitched. There was something deeper behind his words, something he hadn't shared yet. But before she could ask, Claire appeared at the end of the hallway. "Sir, we have a bigger problem." He turned. "Someone posted the photo online." Alexander's expression changed, cold, focused. "And?" he asked. Claire hesitated. "And it went viral. It started with a single post, a gossip blog with a few thousand followers, nothing big, just another anonymous industry whisper site that fed on scandal and speculation. Billionaire CEO caught an office romance with unlikely assistant. Attached, the photo. Molly caught mid-step, eyes wide. Alexander, calm and protective, a single hand on her chair, now interpreted as something far more than just support. The caption below it read, "Insiders say she's just a quiet nobody, so how did she win the CEO's heart? Office affairs use power play." An hour later, it had over 50,000 views. By evening, it was everywhere. Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, office forums. Some comments were jokes, others were cruel. Most were filled with judgment. She must be amazing at something behind closed doors. Plot twist, beauty, and the boss. This is what happens when HR falls asleep. The internet did what it always did. It turned a woman into a story. And Molly? She was the villain, the victim, and the punchline all at once. She didn't cry this time. She wanted to, the second she saw her face plastered online. But no tears came, just a quiet numbness. Like her heart had packed a bag and left without warning. She sat at home on the edge of her bed, holding her phone with both hands. Her inbox was flooded, her voicemail full. Her LinkedIn profile was suddenly swarming with strangers, some offering jobs, others leaving anonymous insults. She turned her phone off, but the silence wasn't any better. The mirror across the room caught her reflection. Same messy bun, same tired clothes, same eyes that had always tried to hide, except now, the world had found her, and she couldn't disappear. Not this time. There was a knock at her apartment door. She froze, then walked over slowly, heart pounding. When she opened it, she didn't expect to see him. Alexander stood there, in jeans and a gray shirt, no blazer, sleeves rolled to the elbow. The man she'd only ever seen in suits now looked real, tired, human. "I figured you wouldn't pick up," he said softly. She didn't reply, just stepped aside and let him in. Her apartment was small, quiet, a rented space full of books and secondhand furniture. No luxury, no pretense. Alexander took it in with a single glance. Not judging, just absorbing. "I shouldn't have come," he said after a moment, "but I didn't want you to be alone tonight." She sat down on the couch, wrapping her arms around herself. "You saw the posts?" He nodded. "I feel like a clown," she whispered. "You're not." "Then what am I?" Her voice cracked. "Because apparently I'm not allowed to just exist without becoming a joke." Alexander walked over and sat across from her, elbows on his knees. "You're a woman who did her job. You kept your head down, and the moment someone gave you a little light, the world tried to rip it away." She looked at him, unsure what to say. Then, finally, she asked the question that had haunted her since the moment the photo went viral. "Is it true?" He blinked. "What?" "What everyone's saying, that you're only protecting me because there's something between us." He didn't answer right away. His silence made her stomach twist. "I need to know," she said, "because if I'm getting destroyed for something that's not even real, I want to at least understand why." Alexander leaned back slowly, exhaling through his nose. Then, quietly, he said, "No, I didn't protect you because there was something between us." Molly's heart sank. "But there is now." She looked up sharply. His voice was calm, honest, not romantic or dramatic, just real. "I didn't expect it," he continued. "I didn't plan it. But after I saw what they did to you, and how you kept showing up anyway, I couldn't unsee it. I started noticing everything, how you listened, how you worked, how you made broken systems work again, and how you kept your dignity, even when they tried to rip it from you." Molly's throat tightened. She didn't trust her voice anymore. "So, yes," he added, "now it's personal. Because I care about what happens to you, and if that makes me a headline, then fine." Her heart thudded. But before she could answer, another sound interrupted the moment. A loud bang on the door. 3 knocks. Heavy. Molly jumped. Alexander stood immediately, alert. He moved to the peephole and glanced out. He stiffened, then turned to her. "It's the press." Molly's blood ran cold. He grabbed his phone. "We need to get you out of here. Now." "But—" "No arguments. Get a jacket." She moved fast, hands trembling as she grabbed her coat. He opened the back door of her building and led her down the fire escape. The press hadn't circled the alley yet. They reached his car at a black SUV parked in a side lot and slipped inside. As the car pulled away, Molly looked back through the window. Her apartment, her safety, her quiet life, all left behind, and somewhere behind them. Cameras started flashing. Molly sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the passing city lights. Her heart beat against her ribs like it was trying to escape her chest. Neither of them spoke for a while. The city was louder tonight, honking, flickering, all was moving. And yet, inside the car, it felt like a different world. One made of silence, adrenaline, and 100 questions neither of them knew how to ask. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. Alexander's hands were steady on the wheel. "Somewhere no one can find you for a while." Her voice was small. "Are you sure this isn't too much?" He glanced at her. "I've never done too little. This won't be the first time I go too far for someone I care about." Molly didn't know how to respond to that. Part of her wanted to ask what that meant, what care meant to a man like him. But a bigger part of her didn't want to break the fragile calm that had settled between them. After a few turns, they pulled into an underground garage below a high-rise building in Tribeca. Security buzzed them in. No cameras, no questions. They took a private elevator to the 32nd floor. When the doors opened, Molly's breath caught. The apartment wasn't flashy, but it was warm. Soft light, wood floors, bookshelves lining an entire wall, a window stretching across the city skyline, a piano in the corner, silent but elegant. "This is your place?" she asked, stepping in carefully like the floor might vanish beneath her. Alexander nodded. "I don't use it much, just when I need to disappear." She gave a faint smile. "You disappear?" His eyes met hers. "Everyone needs a place to be human." He motioned toward the hallway. "There's a guest room, fresh clothes, towels. You can take a minute." She nodded and walked slowly down the hall. Alexander sat on the couch, letting his head fall back. He hadn't meant for any of this to happen, not the gossip, not the fallout, and definitely not the feeling that had crept into his chest every time she looked at him. But now it was too late to undo. He was in this, all the way. Molly closed the guest room door and leaned against it. Eyes closed. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She looked around. The room was simple, clean, and full of quiet. On the bed, a folded sweatshirt and sweatpants, soft, oversized. They looked like they had a story. Everything in his apartment did. She changed, washed her face, and for the first time all day, let her body relax. She walked back to the living room barefoot. He was still on the couch, staring out the window now. He turned when he heard her. His eyes softened. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "No cameras here," he added. She smiled faintly. "Good. One more photo, and I might explode." He patted the couch beside him. She sat, leaving a small space between them. For a while, they just sat there in the stillness. The only light came from the window, the soft glow of the city stretching out into the night. "I always thought," she said suddenly, "that I was invisible because of how I looked. Like if I just wore better clothes or fixed my hair, people would treat me better." He didn't interrupt. "But now I see, they didn't ignore me because I was plain. They ignored me because I didn't need them. I was quiet. I did the work, and I never gave them drama to feed on." Alexander nodded slowly. "You threatened their version of what value looks like." She looked at him. "What about you? What about me? Why were you really watching me?" He turned fully to her. "My father ran this company before me," he said. "He built it like a machine. Sharp, cold, effective. I inherited the empire, but not the rules. I started changing things quietly. But when I saw people like Tasha climbing up by stepping on others, I realized I was still letting his system run the show." Molly listened closely. "And then," he continued, "I saw you. You didn't play the game. You didn't pretend. You just worked, even when it hurt, even when they laughed." She swallowed hard. "That's the kind of person I want to rebuild this company around." She looked away, overwhelmed. He reached into the side table and pulled out a folder. "I wasn't going to show you this yet, but after today, you deserve to see it." She opened the folder slowly. Inside, a job proposal. Team operations manager full-time, leadership track, higher salary, private office. Her name already typed at the top. She looked at him, stunned. "You were going to offer me this?" He nodded. "Before the photo leaked. Before the gossip." Her voice cracked. "You still want me for this? After everything?" "I especially want you after everything." She closed the folder gently, her hands shaking. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes when you're ready." Silence fell again. Then a soft ping. Alexander checked his phone. His expression shifted. "What is it?" she asked. He turned the screen toward her. An article, this time from a real news outlet. Molly Harper, the woman behind the viral office photo, speaks out. Her stomach dropped. "But I never," he interrupted. "You didn't." Below the headline was a fabricated quote. "I don't regret being with him. I know what I'm doing." Her eyes widened. "That's not me. I never said that. I never—" Alexander stood. "I know. Someone's pretending to be you." "Why would they—" "To kill your voice," he said. "Before you can use it." Molly stared at the screen in disbelief. She had stayed quiet her whole life. Now someone had stolen even her silence. And that was her breaking point. She looked up at Alexander, something fierce beginning to burn in her chest. "Then it's time I speak for myself." By the next morning, she couldn't sleep. At 6:30 a.m., she turned on her phone, pressed record, her hands shaking, but her voice steady. Later that morning, at 8:46, the office lobby buzzed with the usual weekday rhythm. Coffee runs, elevator dings, keyboards clacking. But today, there was something else in the air. A silence. A pause, a murmur, heads turned. Because Molly Harper had just walked in, but this time she wasn't hiding. Her long, light brown hair was loose, soft waves falling around her shoulders. Her glasses were gone. Subtle lipstick kissed her lips, and a gentle boldness rimmed her eyes. She wore a simple, wine-colored dress that moved as she walked, hugging her gently, not to flaunt, but to stand. There was no grand entrance, just presence. And that alone was enough to make people stop talking, even the ones who whispered the loudest, even the ones who tried to erase her. Molly didn't look at them, didn't look. She didn't need to. She walked straight to the elevator, head up, shoulders back. When she stepped in, she saw her reflection in the polished door. Same freckles, same girl, different fire. On the top floor, Claire looked up from her desk and nearly dropped her tablet. "Whoa!" Alexander glanced over from his office, then stood up as Molly approached. She paused in his doorway. His gaze swept over her, not with surprise, not with desire, with respect. "You're early," he said quietly. "I couldn't wait." He nodded once. "Come in." She stepped inside, closed the door, and placed her phone on his desk. "I'm posting a video," she said. Alexander blinked. "A video?" She nodded. "To tell the truth. My way." He tilted his head, curious. "Are you sure?" "No," she admitted. "I'm terrified. But I've been quiet long enough. They turned my silence into whatever they wanted. Now they're going to hear me." He stared at her for a long second, then slowly, carefully smiled. "I'll support whatever you decide. But once it's out there, there's no turning back." "I know," she said, "and maybe that's the point." 2 hours later, the video went live. No music, no filters, just Molly, sitting in a quiet room, speaking straight into the camera. "Hi, my name is Molly Harper. I didn't want to make this video. I never asked to be known. I never wanted a spotlight. But someone took a private moment and turned it into a story. Without asking me who I really am." She paused. "So let me answer the question everyone keeps asking. No, I'm not sleeping with my boss. I'm not using anyone. I didn't get lucky. What I did was show up every day. I stayed late. I fixed what others ignored. I was kind when no one noticed. And I didn't do it for attention. I did it because I believe in building something good." Another pause, a breath. "And when the only person who saw that stood up for me, people turned it into a scandal." Because for some reason, the world can't believe a woman like me, quiet, plain, awkward, could be worth standing up for. But I am. And so is every woman who's ever been laughed at in the break room. Every girl who was told to fix herself to be taken seriously. Every person who's been called ugly just because they dared to be different. I see you, and I'm not ashamed anymore. The video ended with a simple sentence. My name is Molly, and I'm not invisible. Within an hour, the views began climbing. 10K, 50K, 120K. By the end of the day, over 500,000 people had watched. The comments came fast. This hit me in the chest, crying. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. I'm a teacher and was treated exactly like this. You're my hero, Molly. Whoever tried to silence you just made you louder. And then the hashtags. Am not invisible. She spoke in the office, the mood shifted. Suddenly, no one laughed in the hallways. No one whispered near the printers. People who never spoke to Molly before nodded quietly when she passed. Tasha, in her glass corner office, slammed her phone down. The smile she wore 2 days ago had vanished. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because now, HR had seen the video too, and the board had called for a meeting, one that included Alexander and Molly. At 4 p.m., they both stood in the executive boardroom. 7 board members, 1 large table, cameras off, voices low. Mr. Blake, said one of the directors, a sharp-looking woman in a gray blazer, we've reviewed the complaint, the footage, the article, and now the video Miss Harper posted. Alexander nodded once. We need to determine if there was any actual misconduct, she continued, or if this was simply media exaggeration. Molly spoke before he could. There was no misconduct, she said, calm and clear. No affair, no favoritism, just a boss who did the right thing when no one else would. The boardroom was quiet. Another member leaned forward. Miss Harper, your video has gone viral. You've become a symbol for something bigger than this company. I didn't do it to become a symbol, she replied. I did it because someone took my story from me. I just wanted it back. The older man beside her adjusted his glasses. And you, Mr. Blake, why did you defend her so publicly? Alexander looked them all in the eye. Because she was being humiliated in front of my entire leadership team, and none of you would have done anything if I hadn't. Silence. He added, if that's against company policy, fire me now. No one spoke. Finally, the chairwoman smiled faintly. We won't be firing anyone today. The investigation is closed. Case dismissed. Molly exhaled sharply, the tension finally breaking in her chest. But as the board adjourned, one of the older men stayed behind. He approached Molly quietly. You reminded me of my daughter, he said softly. She gave up her job last year because of the way people treated her. I wish she'd had your courage. Molly blinked. Don't ever think being quiet means you don't matter, he added. Sometimes quiet people are just the ones worth listening to. And with that, he walked away. Later that evening, as the office emptied, Molly returned to her desk. Same chair, same screen, different woman. Alexander appeared behind her. You did it, he said gently. She turned. No, she said. We did. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a tiny object, her name tag, the old one, torn ribbon and all. He handed it to her. I kept this, he said. Because even before they knew your name, I did. Molly smiled, tears filling her eyes. She placed it gently on her desk, then looked up at him. I'm not scared anymore. And Alexander, the man who built an empire, smiled in a way only one person had ever seen. Because somehow, without trying, she had saved him too. The next morning, Molly arrived at the office before the sun had fully risen. The air was quiet, the city still yawning awake outside the tall glass windows. For the first time in years, she wanted to be there, not to hide, not to prove herself, but because now she belonged. She sat at her new desk, a corner office still half empty. waiting for her to fill it with whatever she chose. A fresh nameplate had been delivered earlier that morning, Molly Harper, operations manager. She smiled softly. The girl who used to tape her name tag together now had her name engraved in brushed silver. Claire knocked lightly and peeked in. "Coffee? First day in the new role deserves first sip priority," Molly chuckled. "Only if you'll have one with me." Claire stepped in and sat on the small visitor's chair, handing over a cup. "For the record," she said, "I always knew there was more to you." Molly looked at her, surprised. "You did?" Claire sipped. "I've seen a lot of people in this office pretending to be powerful, but you're the real kind. Quiet strength is still strength." Molly looked down, her voice soft. "I'm not used to people saying things like that." "Then get used to it," Claire said, "because it's only just beginning." They shared a quiet smile. But outside, just beyond the glass door, someone else was watching. Tasha. She stood with arms crossed, dressed flawlessly as always. But this time, her eyes weren't smug. They were calculating, because she wasn't done. Not yet. By midday, the company had officially shared Molly's promotion across all channels, internal and external. Comments flooded in, praise, applause, messages from young women across industries who saw in Molly a version of themselves finally winning. But then came a whisper, one that slid in like poison under the door, an anonymous tip, to a media outlet far more ruthless than the last. There was a relationship. She lied. He covered it up. Want proof? Attached, a series of screenshots, private messages, Molly's internal chats with Alexander, taken out of context, carefully cropped, just enough to suggest more. And in one message, sent days before the viral photo, "Thank you for seeing me. No one ever has." It wasn't romantic. It was human. But to the wrong eyes, it could be twisted. Within hours, the article was up. Was the video a lie? New evidence suggests Molly Harper and CEO had secret history. Molly found out while in the middle of training her new assistant. Claire came rushing in, phone shaking in her hand. "You need to see this." Molly stared at the screen, her heart dropping. "I didn't send those to anyone," she whispered. Claire looked her dead in the eye. Then someone had access. And in that moment, everything clicked. The only person who ever had admin clearance to cross-reference executive chats, the only person with reason to sabotage both her and Alexander. "Tasha," Molly breathed. Claire's face darkened. "I'll pull the logs," but Molly stood. "No, let me." She left the office, not in fear this time, but fury. She walked straight to Tasha's glass-walled corner, knocked once, and stepped inside without waiting for a reply. Tasha looked up, surprised. "Wow," she said. "No more knocking." "Huh?" "No more pretending," Molly said. Tasha tilted her head. "You seem upset. Someone leaked internal messages between me and Alexander, messages that were harmless. But when cut up and spun, they look like something they're not." Tasha didn't blink. "And you think it was me?" Molly stepped closer. "No, I know it was you." Tasha scoffed, but something in her eyes flickered. Molly leaned in. "You want to know the difference between us?" she said, voice calm. "You climb by stepping on others. I rise because people lift me. I didn't ask Alexander to notice me, but he did, and nothing you do can unsee that." Tasha's jaw clenched. "Do you think you can scare me with some speech?" Molly smiled, not cruelly, but with strength. "I'm not here to scare you," she said. "I'm here to let you know I've already won." Then, from behind her, another voice. "I'd say she both won and caught you." Tasha turned pale. Alexander stepped into the office, holding a printed report. "Access logs from the internal chat system," he said. "We traced the download straight to your credentials. You leaked the messages, manipulated them, and sent them anonymously." Claire stood behind him, arms folded. Tasha opened her mouth, but no words came. "Molly wanted to give you a chance," Alexander said. "I don't," he turned to Claire. "Terminate her contract, effective immediately. Security can escort her out." Claire nodded once and pulled out her phone. Tasha stood, face red, lips trembling. "You two deserve each other," she hissed. "Let's see how long it lasts." She shoved past them and disappeared down the hallway. Molly stood still, trying to process the moment. Alexander looked at her gently. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "I think I will be." But she didn't smile. Not yet. Because now she finally understood something she hadn't before. Being seen comes with a cost. But silence, that cost is far higher. And for the first time, she was done paying it. A week later, the building felt different. The halls weren't quieter. The noise was the same. Phones still rang, keyboards still tapped, and interns still rushed around with iced coffees and misplaced files. But the energy had changed. People looked Molly in the eye now. Not with pity, not with confusion, with respect. When she passed by, some nodded. Others smiled. A few even stopped her to say what they never had before. "I saw your video. It meant something. I'm sorry I didn't speak up when they laughed at you. I should have. You're stronger than I gave you credit for." She didn't need applause. She wasn't chasing it, but being seen, really seen, no longer felt like a threat. It felt like freedom. Alexander sat on the edge of his desk, flipping through updates from the PR team. The scandal had officially died down. The last articles were fading from headlines. Investor confidence hadn't just survived, it had grown. But that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that Molly Harper hadn't disappeared. He looked up as she knocked once and entered, dressed in her usual quiet style, simple blouse, small necklace, hair loose, confidence soft but steady. "You summoned me?" she teased, arching a brow. Alexander grinned. "That still surprises me." "What? That you joke now?" She sat across from him. "It surprises me, too." There was a pause, not awkward, just full of what hadn't yet been said. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "not for protecting me, for believing me." "You didn't need protection," he said. "You needed space." Her eyes softened. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about how easy it would have been to quit, to go back to who I was before, small, safe, invisible. And why didn't you?" She looked at him and said, without hesitation, "Because someone showed me I mattered before the world did." The words hung in the air like truth. Alexander stood, walked to the window, then turned back to face her. "I told you once that no one stood up for me when I needed it," he said. "That wasn't the whole story." She leaned forward slightly. "My father," he began slowly, "was a brilliant businessman, but cold, distant. When I was 20, I fell in love with someone at the company, a woman who didn't fit the mold, quiet like you, smart, kind. But when word got out, he forced her out. No scandal, no noise, just gone." Molly's chest tightened. "I didn't fight for her," he admitted. "I let it happen, and I hated myself for it." There was pain in his voice. Regret buried deep. "That's why you stood up for me," she whispered. He nodded. "Because this time I could." Silence stretched. Then, carefully, she asked, "Did you love her?" He looked at Molly. Really looked. "No," he said gently. "I didn't know what love was back then." Her eyes searched his. "But he wasn't done. But I think I might now." Time froze between them. Molly's breath caught. He stepped closer, but not too close. His voice was steady, not desperate, not dramatic. Just real. "I don't want this moment to pass without saying it. I care about you, Molly, not because you proved anything. Not because the world saw your worth, but because I did, before they did." Her lips trembled, not from fear, but from finally being safe enough to feel everything. "I care about you too," she said, her voice barely more than a breath. And for a moment, the entire world quieted around them. Not every story ends in a kiss. This one didn't need to. Not yet. But something passed between them that said, "This is just the beginning." Later that evening, as the building emptied out, Molly stood alone on the rooftop looking down at the city. The skyline didn't look so intimidating now. She pulled her name tag from her coat pocket. The old one. Torn ribbon. Faded print. She ran her thumb across it, then set it down gently on the ledge. She didn't need it anymore. Because now, when people said her name, it meant something. Molly Harper. The girl who once hid in corners now stood where everyone could see, and she wasn't afraid anymore. Far below, in a quiet corner of the internet, a new account was being created. Anonymous, no profile picture, a single post. Some stories refused to end quietly, and this time that was okay, because Molly had already told hers on her own terms. It had been a month since the storm, since the photo. The rumors, the lies, and Molly Harper had survived every one of them. She now walked into the office with ease, not armor, not hiding behind silence or soft steps or slouched shoulders. She didn't need to. Her voice had been heard, not just inside the building, but beyond it. Universities had shared her video in classrooms. HR consultants used her story as a case study in empathy and workplace culture. Job seekers wrote to say she gave them courage to walk into their own interviews. But through all of it, Molly stayed grounded. She still brought her own tea from home, still smiled at the janitor when no one else looked twice, still paused to help a nervous intern fix the copier. Because being seen had never been her goal, being true had always been. Alexander stood in the back of the conference room as Molly led her first full department presentation. No notes, no nerves, just calm clarity and presence. When it ended, people applauded, not because she demanded it, but because they meant it. He caught her eye through the glass. She smiled. That quiet smile that once barely existed. Now it came freely. Afterward, he met her in the hallway. "You're a natural," he said. "I used to think I didn't belong here," she replied. "Now I know I always did." He nodded, proud. Not because he had changed her, but because she had changed herself, and maybe, in the process, helped change him too. "Dinner?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow. "As in, a work dinner? Or maybe this is something dinner," he smiled. "That's entirely up to you." She took a breath. Then said the most powerful thing of all, "I'll let you know." Because Molly had learned something rare. She didn't need to rush toward anything. She could choose. She had earned that. Later that night she walked home through the city, wind brushing her cheeks, lights flickering above her. She took a new route, one that passed by the bookstore she used to hide in during lunch breaks when things got too hard at work. She paused at the window, in the display, a hardcover journal with gold lettering. "Tell your story before someone else does." Molly smiled and kept walking. Far across town, in a cluttered apartment, Tasha stared at her laptop. The anonymous post she'd made weeks ago hadn't gone anywhere. No one had cared. The world hadn't turned against Molly. It had embraced her. Tasha slammed the lid shut, the glow dying out with a click. The world didn't reward cruelty anymore, not like it used to. People were watching now, listening, and once someone like Molly stood up, others did too. That was the danger, and the beauty. Back at the office, a new intern named Erica shyly approached Molly's desk the next morning. "Hi. Sorry, I was wondering, do you maybe have time to go over this spreadsheet with me? I think I messed it up." Molly smiled gently and gestured for her to sit. "Of course, let's look at it together." And as they leaned in over the laptop, Molly realized something. She had become what she once needed. Not just a voice, not just a symbol, but someone others could turn to. And maybe that was the real win all along. On a rainy Sunday, Molly uploaded one final video. No makeup, no filters, just her. She looked directly at the camera. They called me invisible. They called me ugly. They thought I was easy to overlook, and for a while, I believed them. But the truth is, they were never really looking. I wasn't weak, I wasn't broken, I wasn't small, I was just quiet. And being quiet doesn't make you less. It just means you're saving your voice. For the moment that matters. So if you're out there, or if you're feeling forgotten, hear this, you are not invisible. Not to me. She clicked upload, then went to make tea. No audience needed. She had already won. The end. Now tell me, have you ever felt invisible? What would you say if the world was finally listening? Let me know in the comments, because maybe your story is the one someone else needs to hear. And if this story touched your heart in any way, leave a like, subscribe for more stories like this, and rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments. I'd love to know how it made you feel. You matter, your voice matters, and your presence here means more than you know. See you in the next story.